Thinking of investing, working, or starting a business in the cannabis industry? We've got you covered right here on Plant Problems. Hosted by Tony Frischknecht, Plant Problems takes a different approach to cannabis than what you're seeing and hearing from the mainstream media. Come along with Tony and be in the know about how to invest, work, or start a cannabis business. Let's get the show started with your host, Tony Frischknecht.
Hey everybody, welcome to Plant Problems. I have a very special guest today. He is the district sales manager for one of the largest marijuana nutrient companies in North America right now. He comes with decades of experience. And the reason why I have him on is because he's got quite an insight into the market on the ground level, which is very valuable to not only business owners, but people that are trying to work in the industry along with investors. So I am very happy and pleased to introduce Chet Melton from Austin, Texas today, right, Chet? Is that where you're out of?
That's right. Based out of Austin, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Chet's also a dear friend of mine. We've known each other for almost 10 years now. So I really trust his judgment, and I want to be able to share something really unique with you guys out there, the listeners. So, Chet, what are you doing today? What are you up to?
I got to go to Florida tomorrow. There's a commercial market is still fostering in its infant stage. There is some facilities producing. I think they've just changed the rules, so it's made it easier for people to get consumer goods, but still not 100%. But I'm excited to see how that market is fostering. All the way from Tallahassee to Miami, there is a cannabis industry budding in Florida, but it's very inclusive due to the state law. Quite the opposite of, say, a Colorado or California's got its own thing. But yeah, it's a very inclusive permit market.
So what markets are you focused on right now with Canna? Specifically you.
I am putting a lot of energy into California.
Okay.
Of course, as an economy, that is one of the largest economies in the world, with a population, with a high percentage of consumers in that population, economy with a diverse population. I'm really I personally, because that's one of my specific territories, I'm trying to capitalize on all the cultivation, consumption, production that's going on in that state. And it is quite a horse ride, a bucking bronco kind of ride. California in general is a regulatory state.
Yeah.
So that is always a twist and a turn.
Well, there are some interesting things, of course, always happening in California. When I was out there last month, actually, when I saw you, the taxes was a big thing. I just did a podcast on the taxes that'll be coming out here in the next week or so. And the dynamics between the black market and the legal market are just crazy out there. One side of the state doesn't understand what the other side of the state is doing, which happens in California on a lot of situations. This is no different than the others. You said you're working down in Florida as well. What is the growth happening, let's say, in California right now? Are you guys steadily growing? Is it a push and pull right now? What do you see happening right now?
Well, I try to figure out, your podcast is mostly with investors, right? And consumers and
investors, consumers, entrepreneurs.
Yes, but I've experienced a lot of growth in California, and a large portion of it, probably the same amount that's in the state itself, which is a 2/3 ratio of black to white market, black to legal market. I have seen a good jump in both. I've enjoyed the confusion as a nutrient producer and distributor, enjoyed both sides. We've also suffered from both sides, because as someone gets funding and is trying to do it legally, and they will go, great, we want to use your product. And then they realize that books don't work out too well once you start paying taxes, and you have to deal with labor problems and all that. So I've experienced that.
Well, and for those out there that are switching into the legal market, I'm glad you brought this up, because what advice would you give somebody that's trying to switch over what do you see happening that's probably the biggest mistake that a lot of the black market guys do when they're switching over? What do you see? Top 3.
One of them is believing that switching over is going to solve your problems. I think that's gone away, but that was originally the dream was, okay, all I have to do is get my ducks in a row, find some financiers, all the things it takes to get a company off the ground, and every day they were like, this was the wrong decision. I see my friend over here who's still in the black market. All he does is he posts stuff on Instagram, a day shop, or, there's probably more illegal dispensaries in the county of Los Angeles than there are legal ones. And so that's one, is the regret of believing that
it's going to be easy, right? Yeah, it's going to be easy, and all of a sudden I'll be able to just do what I...
Once I get all these things in a row, once I figure all these things out, and I make it, and I'm a hard worker, and I'm going to succeed, I'm going to do it. And the state just keeps on, can't regulate itself out of a wet paper bag. The state of California creates its own problems. So that's one. What other things do people... What was the question again?
What are the three biggest mistakes, the switch over from the black market, the person that's moving into the legal market?
The second would probably be the kind of relationship you develop with your financer. I've seen a lot of this all over states where, in several aspects of this industry and other industries, where people go, okay, all I need is money. I've got everything else, right?
Yeah.
So then they bring somebody in and they give them controlling interest, because we've always known that money has more influence and more control than ideas and labor.
Yes.
A lot of people go, well, I brought the idea and I did all the hard work. You just brought the money. The money guy goes, yeah, you wouldn't be anything without the money. So not quite understanding the relationship between you as an entrepreneur and the other party as a financier.
Yeah.
That's another huge mistake. You really should understand what a financier does and how it's their money. So therefore it is their project. And I may be wrong on this because I'm not an expert, but I've just seen how the money guy goes, okay, well, now it's ours. We control it because we control the finance. And the guy goes, well, I didn't want that. It's like, well, you asked for it. So be careful what you ask for, I think, is the synopsis on that one. And then the third one, probably not having an understanding of the market and not having a long enough term goal. I see a lot of these guys with 6-month goals, and I'm like, 6 months, nothing's going to change for you in 6 months.
I'm really glad you brought that up. I would like to talk about that some more, because I was just talking to a gentleman this morning about the same exact thing. And it doesn't seem to be that way. It's not specifically to marijuana. People think that way in business, and I kind of don't understand that now. It's gone through the stuff I've had to go through. But you see these guys that say 6 months and I'll be making money by then. But there's so many other things at play that they have no control over. And I don't know why that's not worked into either their business plan or their business idea. And you're working in California, Florida. Where else are you at?
Those are the two major markets that I have to deal with. I do a little bit Alaska population, and that economy isn't going to ever, I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying where there's not a lot of people and not a lot of people with money, you're not going to have a large industry.
I mean, those are two completely different markets. And cannabis on one side of the country is completely different than on the other side, especially with the laws and regulations out of Florida, right?
Right.
You got a few big players that are kind of controlling Florida. Is that correct?
Limited amount of permits with a very strict and stringent prerequisite. So I joke, and I don't want to get in trouble for joking, but if you didn't go to Florida State and you're not in Sigma Chi, you're not going to get a permit. Tallahassee is where the government, the leadership is. That's where they write regulations and laws. Most of the people there are FSU, because that's where Florida State is, in Tallahassee. So that is sort of a good old boys club. And so they issued, I can't remember the number, but it was funny how they issued like 26 permits, and like there was only 7 people who got these 26 permits. You can see the nepotism sort of in there. Now, also they didn't want any Wild West in there. They didn't want any sort of the Colorado, California. You could probably even put Michigan in the mid, those situations where they didn't want any of that cowboy mentality in there. They wanted to seem more controlled and more regulated. So they kept a tighter lid on it.
How is that working down there with the tighter lid? Is that actually happening? Do you seem that it's pretty slow working pace, or what does it look like?
It's a very slow working pace. And so you're seeing still a black market bubble up, especially down in the more diverse cities like Miami and Tampa. Florida's 2 states, we all know. Splits by I-4. Either you're in North Florida, which is sometimes joked as Southern Georgia, and then you're in Florida, which is a whole other world that you can't even say it's Latino, or, there's just such a diverse culture that has developed itself there that So there's two different markets and two different approaches. And, you can see, though, it's going very slow.
So then what challenges do they have in North and South Florida compared to California? What are you seeing the different challenges that they have there?
Well, the major challenge is getting a license. So you're not getting a license.
Okay.
You're going to have to work with someone who's already acquired a license. Because I think it's strictly because of the regulations and the large amount of finance involved. Where in California, you can get started. Those limitations of regulations and finance are still there, but they're there in a different way because I think California wants to portray the image that anybody can do this. And Florida's like, no, not anybody can do this. And for a reason, not anybody should be able to do this. We want to keep this controlled, where California is like, we've got to, and it's pretty much a South mentality to a West mentality. The South has its mentality, and it's got a history of how it treats things in the culture. And the West, in a more liberal way, has its history in the ways it treats things in the culture. And the perception of equality, way more important and drives things on the West Coast than it does in Florida and southern parts of the United States.
I've noticed the equality has popped up quite a bit. It's also happening in Colorado right now. It's becoming more of a topic than it used to be. We're seeing some stuff come out where they're trying to give some equitable, fair terms towards people that have had marijuana. They've had marijuana allegations or they've had legal problems in marijuana in the past. They're trying to reduce those so people can get involved. It seems like from what you're telling me is California, we've got more of an open market for more of a free market, but the drawbacks are you're also competing against a lot more people, right? But at least you're able to compete. In Florida, not so much. You got to know the right person and you got to have some big money backing you to take off.
Yeah, and I think that you don't get fooled in Florida going, I can do this. You go, man, either I can do this or I can't, and you know it. In California, a lot of people are like, oh, we can do this. And it's like, yeah, but do you see the ceiling? Do you see the roadblocks? Do you see the restrictions? They want you to believe you can do it. But the reality comes out a year, 2 years later that not everybody can do it. And, California, from my experience recently too, what's killing them is the fire with the two, and I don't know who to blame, but it's the fires and the electric availability. And those kind of go hand in hand, especially in Northern California. If you don't have the finances to have a generator and diesel and get that ready for the next time PG&E turns off the power on a grid for 4 to 7 days, you go out of business. And that's even if you own a gas station or 3,000 light commercial grow.
So very similar to what they run just in hotels, right, where they have a backup generator that's sitting waiting. So they have that much trouble with power up there, huh?
They did last fire season. PG&E didn't want to get sued for being responsible for any fires due to the low quality and minimum upgrade of the grid. So PG&E is minimal as it can on upgrade to the grid infrastructure because of its stockholders and its shareholders' desire. I believe in capitalism and chocolate, but there's a point where there's a negative return.
Okay.
I was having meetings. I was supposed to have meetings with several cultivators who had indoor facilities, and they were like, I can't do this right now because I'm worried that I will not be here on this next round because I won't have the power. Of course, this is a very right to cultivate another crop. And at the same time, a lot of these people, especially Northern California, that's where I do it mostly, is these people are from the community. And so when there's a fire on the other side of the hill, 3 of your workers live on the other side of the hill.
Oh, wow.
And all of a sudden you're short production because either they're stressed about their house or their brother's house burning down, or it's more than just stressed about it.
It's their house.
Yeah, they're refugees or they're temporary without all the amenities that a solid workforce would need to be a solid workforce.
Well, in the electrical, you bring up a good point. The electrical, I never even thought about that. I mean, so these guys aren't willing to invest any more money in their grid, but yet they're charging a huge amount to bring that electricity to the customer.
Right. And for us to talk about, it's always obvious, and I hate this, it's always obvious to point out the downfalls. What's hard is to point out the solution. Because if I could have a solution to PG&E, I'd be on a different podcast, probably wearing a more high dollar suit. You know what I mean? It's
yeah.
Those solutions are above my pay grade.
I understand. Well, I appreciate you bringing up those facts because those are things that most people won't think about. You actually opened my eyes to it. I didn't think about power being an issue. We've all grown in different areas, but that's the one thing that comes up is every area is going to have its own challenges, right? You're going to have potentially weather challenges down in Florida that you wouldn't have in California. And you brought up the fact that basically California has allowed anybody to get a license, but that's probably due to a lot of the fact that they have huge ag in California. So everybody needs to get a chance to get into this industry, right? Florida, much different. I mean, I think even the citrus communities and the citrus farmers out there, there's a few of them that run the whole thing. From what I understand, I could be wrong.
Well, yeah, and that's the other aspect that you want to contrast if we're on this topic of contrasting the two territories. Of course, there's other places, I don't want to leave Michigan out or the Northwest out. But California and it goes back to politics in my mind, but California has a water problem. And its water problem is based on inability to regulate itself. I suggest to anybody to watch a National Geographic documentary called Water and Power, which talks on the way the state of California and 2 or 3 land barons taking control of all the water in California.
That's pretty scary.
It's terrifying because, this water issue is not just something that you say is a water issue. I wouldn't want to say it's a human right, but you would have to assume that if anything's a human right, air and water.
Yeah.
Are those two things that you can't regulate away from people.
Sounds like people are trying to do it, that for sure.
Yes.
Water is a big thing. We could spend a whole hour on water itself. So you guys know out there, the listeners, these guys are in the stores working with the owners that are selling hundreds of thousands of dollars of nutrients a month. And they're seeing these growers come in through the door all the time. Whether they be legal or they're still in the black market, we're still starting to see a trend. And do you guys feel like your business is picking up, or is it growing, or is it about steady right now with what is happening in the market?
Due to all the factors, and there's so many, it's steadily growing. If you were to ask me strictly as a high-end nutrient salesperson, I would have always preferred it to be a taboo market. This is just a very selfish comment, but the prices would have stayed high. Therefore, the investments would have stayed high. The inability to grow low-grade product would have stayed low. But now, due to these different factors, we see one is the ability to produce a par to subpar. We call them mids product, mid-range. That's what mids stand for. And that is dominating the market now. And so your Ernest and Julio Gallo and your Robert Mondavis are shitting all over the market in the cannabis context. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got to almost know somebody, because when you go to a dispensary, or any place that's a regulated product, it's going to have a cost factor over a quality factor. And we're on the pendulum swing, and I'm waiting for that, because this whole generation has just known mids. So the people who started consuming cannabis at the age of 21, 2 years ago, and for the next 30 years, there's finally someone's going to go, hey, there's actually a better product than Marlboro Reds out there. And that's the American Spirits, or any sort of other industry has this example.
Yeah, I think there's a few places here in Colorado that we're starting to see that, because they've just been able to consistently grow for a while, right? They've gone through the growing pains of running a business. And, what happens is you get stuck in the day-to-day, and you get very little time to actually work on how to make your grow better and make your plant product better at the end of it. So we're starting to see a little bit of that. I'm kind of wondering when that wave's going to start sweeping across the rest of the market. And I think it's a matter of maturity. I mean, what would you say?
If we started 4 or 5 years ago, 10 years, so we've got about 6 more years of it peaking towards, not being accessible to high quality cannabis. Now, everybody out there who sees this and who is on the one side of the market is going to go, I can get high quality cannabis all the time. Yeah, but you're also the same person who goes to the dispensary and goes, all of this is shit.
Yeah.
Northern California is a little ahead of the game on that, because they've always prided themselves in words like sun-grown and dry farming and these techniques that are from the 70s and 80s. And now they're coming back and you going, look, anybody can make their arguments. Anybody can produce cannabis, but we're producing a specific quality of cannabis.
Are you seeing new techniques out there that are changing the way ag is done at all successfully?
No, nothing revolutionary. Like, I always look at the wine industry. There was 2 revolutions to the wine industry that, if you know anything about them. One was in Italy, they started making wine in smaller 55-gallon barrels instead of the 100 and the 200-liter barrels. That was a revolutionary moment. They also started changing the dimensions of rows so that the rows were closer together and gave it a different sort of fruit breakdown. But I haven't seen anything revolutionary like that in the cannabis industry. Any sort of Northern California technique, not to take away from those people, is not a new technique. It's probably an ancient technique. Anything that's in the indoor industry, you would have seen that's either new to the indoor cannabis industry or perceived as new is actually something probably coming from the floriculture industry and the greenhouses of Europe or the coasts of California. So they're just adopting previously used techniques. I haven't really seen anything, like people go, well, what about the metal halides, right? These high pressure sodium metal, these 315s and these 6.3s.
Talking about light bulbs right now, everybody.
Right, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Light fixtures are probably my favorite as of now and have been in the agriculture industry forever. So just because they're new to the newest thing to hit, DEs, which were dual-ended, another light fixture, that was the generation before, the popular fixture before that, were also in greenhouses. So a lot of this is other industries, whether it's greenhouse production, hoop houses, light fixtures, techniques, irrigation equipment. We're not created just for this industry. I mean, everything from twist tie to how you set up your lights was adopted from another industry.
Are you seeing there are some true commercial grows happening out there? Are people really understanding what commercial growing of cannabis is?
Yes. I can mention a mutual friend who she has had her ups and downs.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk to somebody who knows the cultivation cannabis industry, this woman, I don't know if I feel comfortable saying her name. You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
She is definitely someone who I have perceived as knowing how to figure out the market. She's not alone. There are other people out there who have definitely, I don't want to go, this person, because if there's people on this podcast who are like, I want to put my money somewhere, then they're going to immediately follow these recommendations, and I'd be fearful of putting anybody in the wrong direction or swamping anybody with an inflood of communication. But I have definitely seen a whole bunch of people out there succeed. The Jungle Boys and their revolution, I guess there is a revolution. It was the social media.
Okay.
I just heard the other day that there is a formula on how many likes equals money or how many followers equals money. You can probably look this up. The Jungle Boys, so much credit to them, the one particular guy, on capitalizing on the explosion of Instagram and social media to promote their brand, regardless of their product, to promote their brand.
So I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. You could have the best product in the world, but if nobody knows that it's there, it doesn't matter. There's guys that are taking this, these people in particular, the Jungle Boys that you're mentioning, they're taking it and they may not have something that's revolutionary, but they know how to get their message out there. And I think that's something that I'm slowly understanding more and more how pivotal that is for your growth of success. Because there's so many, not just the cannabis industry, but there's so many other industries that are starting to figure this out. And this is such a new concept, at least for guys like you and me, that have not had the ability to really market our product the way everybody else does. And now we're starting to see that there are people that are adopting that, and it's casting them light years where they would have been in the past, right? I mean, that's social marketing and social media is such a huge key to this deal. And I think people that understand that coming into our industry are going to do really well just because if they understand how to do that well. And that's just some of the stuff I'm seeing. I mean, I'm not sure where you stand on that. But.
Yeah, no, you can see it with Mike Tyson's. If you ever drive down the freeway in LA, you'll see these billboards now.
He's got a ranch down there.
Right, and there's a billboard on 405 on the way to LAX. Everybody who has to go to LAX passes by, and it's a billboard of him and going, Tyson's Ranch, come out there. And it's in Coachella or somewhere in the high desert where a lot of these facilities are. But that sort of branding.
He was talking about it on Howard's.
And there's Kaya, which is in Jamaica. A friend of mine is participating in that, and that is the Marley Estate involvement,
Yeah.
You got the Snoop Dogs. You've got most of the hip-hop artists. I think some other people are getting involved. Probably there's some MMA guys involved, and where there's a crossover there. But, yeah, it's the brand promotion. I mean, a lot of it is something I can't quite understand, and I just have to say once again that is above my pay grade, because if I could figure out what the Jungle Boys were doing or anything like that, who are not celebrities.
You do understand how important it is. You may not understand every detail, right? But you know how important it is.
Right. I think it's almost essential.
Yeah, exactly.
Until social media itself has got a downturn, which it will have, probably either because of its saturation in people's lifestyle or it being replaced with, if you said, well, what's going to replace TV? And people said social media. no one would understand what you're saying. So someone's like, well, what's going to replace social media? Whatever it was that people didn't believe was going to replace TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Once again, by concepts I can't quite predict, because I wish I knew that Jeff Bezos and Amazon was going to be that big, because then I would have been on that board.
There's always another one coming, right?
Right.
So to change gears a little bit, well, not to completely, but Cannabis, their corporate is in Holland, correct?
Yes.
So where are you seeing Europe in all this?
Spain.
Yeah.
Spain is the market. It was once Holland, but unfortunately, due to the strict regulations that Holland put on cannabis cultivation in 2014, it sort of spread out from there. So UK got a lot of it, but UK is still a black market. Yeah. And Spain is what I would have to say is a gray market. It's just that Spain has such a laissez-faire, hands-off attitude towards certain things where its whole culture is sort of like, whatever. The mañana, a lot of people who are from California or the Southwest kind of know that the Mexican culture has a mañana, right? Tomorrow. We'll worry about it tomorrow. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Spain is amazing that they taught the Mexicans in that culture mañana. Like, what? What is it you need? Oh, dude, mañana. For sure we're going to take care of that tomorrow. And I think the government sort of has that same, as long as it's not destruction to life and property, specifically people who have a lot of property. That's the only thing that the government really concerns itself with. And it sort of leaves people to these in between. I don't even think it's decrimmed in Spain. Maybe culturally it is.
Is it possible to start a business there, like outside? Can you go there, like say from the U.S. and start something there? Is that possible? Do you know?
First, you'd have to be part Spanish. I mean, it's sort of the same thing of like going to the Northeast and saying, I'm not from around here. I'm not from Boston or New York or Connecticut. Can I get started? Hell no.
Yeah.
Hell no. Go back to where you came from. If you went to Spain, you'd probably have to work for some Spanish people and try to figure out, and you'd have to speak Catalonian or Spanish, and you'd have to be a Spaniard, whether by birth or by heart.
But you're saying there is some opportunity there.
I have always told people, go to Spain, either for influence or for opportunity. Go to Spain. If you're someone who regards yourself as wanting to or having knowledge in the cannabis culture and market, then you better have participated in some Spanish time.
I think that is probably the greatest way to end our interview here. If you are interested in cannabis, understanding that side, and if you're able to go to Spain, coming from Chet.
Cannabis is March 15th. Don't quote me on these, but you can look it up. Look up on Cannabis. Canna has a huge influence in the Cannabis show. The show has grown over years. It is the mecca right now for the World Apex of Cannabis March. Check it out.
That's a bold statement there. I like it.
I stand by it.
Nice. Well, Chet, if anybody wants to reach out to Canna, or they need to reach out to you, talk about nutrients or anything, or they're interested in talking to you about anything, what's the best way to reach you? There's
a form submission. So go to cannagardening.com. And on cannagardening.com, you'll scroll down where stores are located. You can see where you can get feed charts. And then there's a place in there where you can submit a question. And the moderator will get back to you and inform me, and we can go from there.
Awesome. Well, anybody out there, if you guys are interested and have any more questions for me or for Chet, comment, go to my podcast blog at plantproblem.com, and you can leave questions and comments there. And I would be more than happy to dig into some deeper dives and figure out the answers for you. So,
one more thing to all your viewers out there, I have small personal crusades in life. And one that is always dear to my heart is verbiage. And I think that we should always be calling it cannabis. Marijuana has got a negative stigma to it. It was created, everybody can research on this. It was created by people who were against hemp. Hemp is cannabis. And the flower, whether it has a high amount of THC or a low amount of THC and vice versa with the CBD, let's call it cannabis because that's a more scientific and less negative derogatory term.
You're absolutely right. I learned that very early. So I appreciate you pointing that out. Thanks again, Chet, for being on, and I look forward to talking to you soon, and I can't wait to see what you have coming up next.
Thanks.
Thank you guys so much for listening in today. As always, please visit me at plantproblem.com, where you can subscribe, leave comments, or ask questions. That's plantproblem.com. I want to bring to you some of the best stuff for cannabis. There are so many questions, so many things unknown, and I am always looking for topics. So feel free to leave me topic suggestions too. All right. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye for now.
You've just listened to another insightful episode of Plant Problems. If you like what you heard so far, don't forget to tell your friends and colleagues. For additional resources or to leave a review, head over to plantproblem.com. Join us again next week on Plant Problems with Tony Frischknecht. We look forward to having conversations with you as we go along this journey.